Hey everyone, Seth here. Quick reminder, if you want to contact us with a question or comment or whatever, there are a couple ways you can do so. Either you can go to our email at more.layers.podcast@gmail.com, or you can go to YouTube, use the comment section below the videos, or a direct YouTube message is another way you can do that. And just feel free to give us any questions, comments, podcast topic suggestions, whatever, shout out, whatever, and we'll try to get back. Hey everyone, welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and welcome to the end of May, or at least almost.
Yeah, we just got past. This would be day we're recording this the day after Memorial Day, and feel free to tell us in the emails and comments how you celebrated the day. What did you do? I don't know. This wasn't part of my plan, but I ended up watching actually last night the I think HBO film Taking Chance, starring Kevin Bacon. It's kind of based on a true story of someone who died serving in Iraq. Basically, Kevin Bacon plays a guy who's kind of charged with kind of like escorting the casket.
Right, yeah. I personally didn't do anything too specific to celebrate per se. And while he didn't lose his life while fighting, I thought a lot about my grandfather on my dad's side, who served during World War II. He has since passed away. It's been a little over 10 years now, actually, because he passed, I think, either late January or early February of 2014. Uh, but I thought a lot about him. I remember doing some research on World War II in school many years ago, covering some of the stuff he might have been involved in or just anything along that line. But regardless, to any who have or continue to lay down their lives for our sakes, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Very much appreciated for sure.
We can never fully repay it, but we do at least acknowledge how much of a sacrifice that is.
Yeah. And and kind of speaking of death, a couple of pretty big name public figure deaths have actually occurred in the last about, I'd say, week or so. And the first one, this came as a surprise to me, Morgan Spurlock, guy behind the documentaries like Super Size Me and The Greatest Movie Ever Sold. Super Size Me, one of my personal favorite movies. And he had been battling cancer and just the other day passed away at the age of 50 something. So a bit of a bit of a shocker, but it's a pretty big loss, I think, to the media world. I think this guy, what he has contributed is so valuable and so memorable. I feel like, yeah. And this was something I certainly didn't expect to happen so soon.
And he wasn't that old either. He was in his mid 50s, I think.
Yeah, 50 something. Yeah, definitely over 50.
But still, it's just like it's expected, of course, when somebody is in their 90s or somehow even higher than that. But as I experienced with my father, if it's something as early as your 50s, and God forbid earlier than that, it can come as a shock because that's not something we're used to. We're used to seeing people live to their 80s, 90s, possibly even hundreds. And then when someone's life is cut short, that's a heavy blow, especially when they've left a big legacy or made a big impact on the world around them. And I'm not too familiar with a lot of Spurlock's work, but I definitely know of Super Size Me. In fact, I think a few years ago there was some form of a sequel.
Yeah, Super Size Me Too, Holy Chicken. I also that's also available for streaming if for anyone who's interested, and I watched that one.
How much of a time gap was there between the first and the second one?
I'd like to say like maybe over a decade, I would say.
Because I want to say the first one came out in the early 2000s, and then
Yeah,
I remember reading the second one came out in 2017, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And if anyone's curious, now he doesn't go on like a whole fast food chicken binge or anything like that, but he does kind of do a sort of experiment where he starts his own chicken joint. So
Right.
if you're interested, you can look up on your leisure, how to stream it if you want to see it. Might want to give it a look sometime.
And even not, IMDb is a great source to look up the past and possibly even future works of various people, whether it be directors, writers, producers, even actors, and just to see what kind of work this guy's done. You might find something that you're familiar with, you just didn't know his name was attached.
Sure. Yeah. And one other loss that got my attention, and it's in a way this may have been a somewhat quieter death, but it's doesn't make it any less impactful. I would say this one was probably even more. The death specifically of Richard Sherman, one half of the songwriting duo behind a handful of Disney projects, including the Winnie the Pooh shorts, and perhaps most notably Mary Poppins, which was also the last musical we did with Artists Unlimited. So it's definitely a pretty big headline, I think, for us and everyone involved.
Yeah, obviously we didn't plan for
No,
this to be the last show we did before he passed, but in a way, I guess we could now look at it as kind of a like a farewell tribute type of thing because we acted out some of the songs that he helped write. Uh, I know Super Cal
yeah,
was a big one for
sure.
sure. But I think
Step in
else,
Time, Jolly
yep, Step in
Holiday.
Time. Uh, and I don't think it was played by him necessarily, but in the movie Saving Mr. Banks, I think they covered how the film was made, which involved, of course, the Sherman brothers.
Right.
Uh, so we might have seen a younger version of him played by somebody else, but I think at the end of the film, they play the actual audio of the Sherman brothers talking to the person who created the story of Mary Poppins. So while we didn't necessarily see him, we heard his original conversation.
Yeah, they do some like audio clips at the end during the credits of like filmmakers in conversation with author P.L. Travers, though I didn't like quite really catch much, if anything, that was said. I know it's there though.
And it's kind of interesting to think about how I believe when the first time we did Mary Poppins, somewhere in the pamphlet, we made note that the person who created her, uh, I believe it said she had passed away shortly after she made the approval to have Mary Poppins become a musical. And now we've done the musical, and one of the people who wrote some of the songs passed away. So coincidences. But I think he also did It's a Small World.
Yes, oh, that's right. The iconic Disney park song specifically created for the little boat ride of the same name. Chances are you've heard it before.
Even if it was that brief snippet in Lion King.
Right, of course.
Like, not too many people think of that scene, maybe because it's so short, but it's when Zazu is in like a literal rib cage, if you will, singing for Mufasa, and that's the first thing that comes out of his mouth, and or not Mufasa, Scar. Um, and Scar is just like, no, please, anything but that.
Oh yeah, yeah. A little bit of a self-referential, playful humor there.
And we kind of did that to some degree ourselves when we did Lion King Jr. in 2021. But instead of It's a Small World, we would sing something like Let It Go or Be Our Guest.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. My personal earliest memory of the Sherman Brothers was not necessarily I I don't know, maybe it was the Honey Tree short, but then the first time I like heard of them by name that I remember was like during there was actually a sort of featurette that played on cassette at the beginning of the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh cassette, right before the film, a little sort of documentary short, kind of about the development of the shorts and the eventual movie, and they interviewed the Sherman Brothers at one point.
I think I remember that. Yeah, because I was about to ask if he was involved in the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and then you mentioned the sort of little mini documentary at the beginning. It's like I remember some people talking, and even one person doing a good like Tigger voice, like maybe the original voice of Tigger or something.
Yep, it was him, the original OG actor. Yep.
It's like I couldn't at that age realize who the Sherman brothers were, but I would probably have to say that through that opening, they made the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh was probably one of my earliest um, moments of being aware of the Sherman brothers' work.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so, as you might have guessed by that little comment there, here, we, Jordan and myself, I mean, have have come from a rather different time than we're living in now.
Mhm.
Now, we were young growing up in the sort of cassette era for a while. And then I guess when we got to like teen, preteen, it kind of transitioned to DVD. But I do fondly remember like, you know, popping in cassettes, watching a few the same ones a lot of times, um, and renting something every now and then from Blockbuster Video in our old hometown before coming to Rochester. I think we continued to do that a little bit when we moved here, but they've since taken down, of course, that store, and now they've replaced it with a liquor store. They just kept the arrow signs the same.
Yeah, renting a video from a physical store was a lot bigger when we were growing up. And they still were around as we got older, but as time went on, they became a lot less relevant to most of the society. They did try to kind of make a comeback in some ways, if I remember correctly. Blockbuster was seemingly coming back from the brink, but as many have pointed out at this point, there's literally only one actual store for Blockbuster open at this point. And
Yeah,
for
and I
all those,
believe
go
yeah, and I
ahead.
believe they actually did a documentary on it that I saw, titled "The Last Blockbuster."
Yeah, and it's still open. I'm not sure how they're making that work, but I guess just to keep the name alive or something. And for those who are big into Netflix, many of you may not realize this, but Netflix also used to be like a video, rent a movie service where they would mail the movies to your house. You wouldn't be streaming them anytime you want. You had to actually wait for it to be sent to you. And then when you were done, you could send it back.
And Blockbuster at one point, I believe, tried a similar delivery service system for a while called Total Access, and it was basically the same, except you could also swap discs in person at the store as well.
Sure. I mean, a lot of these video stores, they were kind of like libraries if they were based around movies. Granted, a lot of libraries now will also have a movie section where you can borrow one, but for these video stores, that's their main focus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely took advantage of that back in the day. Not just getting from video stores, but also getting cassettes from public libraries. And yeah, I don't know. Well, were there any? What were the biggest like the biggest cassettes that you like popped in as a kid, whether it was something you owned or checked out or whatever, what would you say?
The first handful that come to my mind, one of them was the pilot movie for Buzz Lightyear: A Star Command.
Hmm.
I watched that a ton as a kid. I was big into Buzz Lightyear, a lot into superheroes and such. But yeah, that was definitely one of the popular ones. And then the other two that I would play a lot, uh, they were a couple. How do I phrase this? Like a couple cassettes that had multiple episodes of a show that my brother and I grew up with called Darkwing Duck, which
Yep.
the character did make a resurgence in the DuckTales reboot from back in 2017, but Darkwing Duck used to be its own show.
Yeah.
And that we had a couple cassettes that had, I think, at least 2 or 3 episodes each that I would watch all the time.
Yeah.
And
And
then
Darkwing
probably
Duck
The
was
Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh would definitely be the other one.
yeah, and Darkwing Duck was voiced by Jim Cummings, who has also been the longtime voice actor for both Tigger and Pooh,
Yep.
and is also uh, well, the voice responsible for the announcer dialogue of a rather infamous teaser trailer that appeared on a lot of Paramount Nickelodeon cassettes I watched for the Rugrats movie. I don't know if it's ringing a bell at all from that, but
I don't know if I probably seen it, but
yeah,
it's been so long that I probably wouldn't even remember recognizing whether or not it was him.
yeah,
Uh,
I didn't recognize it myself. I didn't pick up on that. I actually, because I'm such a nerd, I actually did like Google research on that specific trailer and figured out, oh, that's Jim Cummings. Oh, okay.
yeah, and he would also start to become popular when it came to kind of doing the singing voice for some characters. Like a lot of people are aware now that for the song Be Prepared in Lion King, Jeremy Irons did do most of the song, but everything after the line, You Won't Get a Sniff Without Me, was actually Jim Cummings who had to kind of fill in for him because his voice got messed up. Uh, and for the longest time, I had no idea there was a difference. I can definitely hear it now when I'm looking for it, but he did so well imitating Jeremy Irons that it sounded almost exactly the same. And the same can be said for the movie Anastasia, where Christopher Lloyd, I believe, did the voice of Rasputin. But then when it came to his villain song in the Dark of the Night, it was sung by Jim Cummings. And again, I could not tell the difference.
Yeah, I had no idea with the be prepared thing. No idea. I not even until you said it. Forget what was I? Yeah, yeah, and I do know he has dabbled a bit into singing. He did the vocals for the Cheshire Cat in a never used deleted song for Alice in Wonderland. Well, a remake of it technically because Alice came out like long before that.
Right.
So, oh yeah, and and in that movie, of course, the cat was voiced by the original Winnie the Pooh actor Sterling Holloway. So it's not that surprising. So
And I remember so many people pointed out how characters like Winnie the Pooh, Cheshire Cat, and Kaa the Snake
yeah,
sounded almost exactly the same. It's like, well, they were this voiced by the same people, so
yeah,
that definitely makes sense. In fact, I still laugh at this. There was a video that came out a few years ago where somebody had Jim Cummings say Darkwing Duck's famous line, "Let's get dangerous," in the voice of a bunch of his other characters. At one point, he said it as Pooh, and then they wanted him to do it as Kaa the Snake. But Jim Cummings was like, "Don't ask me for Kaa. He's basically evil Pooh."
okay, okay.
It should be an easy find on YouTube, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. I had some go tos. I'd say like Um, Maybe the first Toy Story for a while. A Bug's Life was a big one. Toy
Hmm.
Story 2, you know, that too. And then for some reason, even though I pretty much just sat and listened, I didn't really sing along with them. The Disney sing along songs videos we owned. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the other thing too. We popped in a lot of Disney films that were on VHS.
yeah. Yeah, like what were some of the other big ones?
I would definitely say Beauty and the Beast was a big one. Aladdin was a big one. Uh, let's see. Those were definitely some of the most popular. Bugs Life, like you said, the Toy Story films, especially the second one. I remember we watched the second one a lot.
Mm, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I would say those are like at least the top 4 or 5 we would probably pop in more often than not.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, Bugs Life and Toy Story 2 kind of introduced me to some of Pixar's short films as well. Luxo Jr., Jerry's Game, and we've probably talked about those briefly before, but yeah, it's,
And that was around the time that Pixar would also add animated bloopers during their credits.
right.
And that is something I wish they would bring back because it's just something so unusual, yet so creative, where you make your animated characters seem like actual actors, actual people. And that just added to the humor because in animation, you can get away with bloopers that you could not do in real life. So it's like, I know it may cost extra money, and I understand that, but if it's something people really like and you could make a profit from it because people love to see them, I would say bring them back.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that they did kind of do something similar on the Incredibles DVD, but that was more like technical goofs or rough, unfinished renderings and stuff. Not quite the same, but
Yeah, I think Madagascar did something similar.
yeah.
Uh, but one non Pixar movie that did the same thing was VeggieTales adaptation of Jonah,
Right.
where on the bonus features they had bloopers both in English and Spanish, believe it or not. Uh, but yeah, they also had animated bloopers where they made the characters seem like actual actors, and it was hilarious.
Yeah. 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 I feel like maybe that was their attempt to kind of like copy what Pixar did more or less. I do know, there's an interesting story if you want, or if you want to find out more, read the book. I recently read Phil Vischer's book. Phil created VeggieTales. I think actually before he started VeggieTales, he attended one of the SIGGRAPH conventions. Know what that is? Look it up. Where I think where John Lasseter was. This was like back in like the mid, maybe, yeah, I think maybe like the mid 1980s. So before either studio really got on the map. And
Sure.
John Lasseter was there, kind of doing a presentation, and they briefly met. And if you want to find out more, read the book on at your leisure.
Oh yeah, him and Mike Naraki were some of the big names attached to VeggieTales. And I've seen, I won't go too far off topic, but I've seen some people point out that apparently an announcement was made for a new Larry Boy movie coming out in like 2026 or something like that. Now, some
Oh, I
people
didn't.
are, hmm?
I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know this until recently either. But what concerns me is that on Phil Vischer's Twitter, he made it fully aware that even he wasn't aware that this was happening until the announcement was made, which definitely concerns me because it's like if the original creators are not attached to this project, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty much out of his hands, or has been out of his hands for years since his studio went bankrupt because of the lawsuit. A false one, to be clear,
Right.
and the pretty much the creative ownership rights were pretty much bought out. I think more recently by Universal or something. So I feel like
Yeah,
it's really beyond his control.
it basically was. There's a guy on YouTube, I can't remember his channel name, but he covered the whole story of Larry Boy, and in the process, he kind of documented how the ownership of the VeggieTales name kind of transferred from studio to studio over a relatively short period of time. And I'm sure that really sent things into a spiral. Maybe that's why some of the characters were redesigned briefly. But yeah, it jumped around so much, he probably just did not want to deal with it anymore anyway.
Well, yeah, well, I guess there's only one way to find out if it'll be good or not.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so yeah, it was definitely a pretty interesting time. But now, thanks to the internet, and well, we can say it's not all the whole VHS experience isn't necessarily entirely lost in time. As some of you probably already know, there's so many VHS opening captures on YouTube where you can kind of relive the whole warning screen and promo experience, mm, like with a simple click.
And one thing I will always remember from, I want to say this was more so on DVDs, but I think it was also on VHSs, was this one screen when watching various Disney films a while back. Was there's this one screen where there was this peaceful music playing in the background while somebody said something like, "Coming soon to theaters."
Oh yeah, and I actually because again I'm so nerdy, I did watch um I actually watch a YouTube channel by some guy who was doing like some virtual like convention meetups like remotely with all these different voice actors
Mhm.
like Jim Cummings and Brian Cummings. I don't think they're related. Brian Cummings responsible for a lot of those bumpers, such as the aforementioned "coming soon to theaters" voiceovers. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, the nostalgia.
it was good. So we got to like talk with these guys for like a couple minutes each via video call. Get a screenshot taken with them. It was a nice little thing to see.
Sure. And I think a video you showed me leading up to this, there was a guy, or rather a couple of guys, who organized this plan that works similar to those random little book cabinet things that you might find on the side of the road somewhere, where you can take a movie and leave another one.
Yep, there is a news video that I saw that kind of got the ball kind of rolling in my head. Basically, a sort of video exchange kiosk, kind of similar to what you see now with like book kiosks. I think there's one actually on my street that in front of some neighbor's house, and then I think I see some of the schools in the district I work at also doing the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, it's like yeah, it's a pretty interesting time with that stuff going on.
Sure. And I mean, I have a VHS player here, so
Yeah.
I don't know if I can leave a VHS there though, because when we moved, I think we got rid of most of ours
Yeah.
just to make it easier to pack everything up. But yeah, maybe at some point I'll check one out if I can find one.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, we still got those VHS capture uploads that'll kind of maybe take some of you guys back.
Absolutely. I would love to see those again.
Yeah. 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 Anyway, kind of going on a similar topic here with today's curious question, and the question is: if a musical adaptation of a film was adapted for the screen, like they did with Hairspray or Mean Girls, which started out as a straight up movie, then became a musical, and then the musical was made into a movie. So, if something like that came out, who would you want to see in what role?
Now, I definitely had to limit myself a little
Yeah.
bit when doing this because I could have thought of several. movies that were made into musicals and be like, what if it turned into a movie? Uh, but I tried to keep it to a decent amount. And the first thing I thought of was Shrek the musical, because there was a musical based on the first film,
Yeah.
and it's like if we were to turn that into a musical where all the songs were featured in the movie, because I think when they wrote the musical, only two songs from the film were in the soundtrack for the musical. That being "I'm a Believer" and "Welcome to Duloc."
Sure.
But if we took all the songs from the musical and put it into a film, I would definitely love to see that. And when it came to thinking of who could play Shrek, a lot of people said someone named David Harbour when I was doing my research. I'm not too familiar with this guy,
Oh, I am.
at least not by name. But if you are, cool. Uh, yeah, I just don't recognize the name too well.
Yeah, but you did research on him?
I did do a little bit, but ultimately, I still went with my first choice. And maybe it's because I've seen him do it, but I would love to see our mutual friend Dalton Lutta bring back his performance of Shrek in film form.
Like, yeah, well, he is doing the voice acting class, right, that you're a part of. So,
Yep. And
yeah,
he's definitely done some fan dubs and such. I just don't think Shrek is one of them. But I'm sure if he had a scene that he wanted to do, he could definitely nail it. It's like if he can do Shrek on stage, I think he could do Shrek in a movie.
yeah, and if they don't, hypothetically, I think David Harbour would also be a good choice. I mean, I've seen like not just Stranger Things, but his little string of Tide Super Bowl commercials, and he does know how to be pretty good, goofy, funny. So
All right.
and kind of wisecracking. So I think he'd also be a good fit.
All right. Duly noted. And of course, you can't have Shrek without Donkey. And I
Mhm.
definitely kept my name out of this one because I didn't want to seem too biased. Um, but I wrote down Eddie Murphy first because he, of course, did it before in the films. Um, and he even stated after Puss in Boots: The Last Wish came out that he would love to see a donkey-based movie made. Granted, that would probably still be animated, but it might be fun to see him do a film version of the musical too. Uh, but maybe if not him, another popular choice could be Kevin Hart.
Yep.
'Cause Kevin Hart is well known to have that wild energy, and he's played some sporadic animal characters before, like Snowball in The Secret Life of Pets. And while he may not sound exactly like Eddie Murphy's donkey, which I know some people might be a little upset about, I feel like he could put his own fun spin on it.
Sure.
And then the other one, maybe a slightly less popular choice, but I then thought of Jack Black, who's definitely played his handful of zany animal based characters before. So I feel like Donkey would be right up his alley.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually I mentioned before we started recording the other day during the weekend I went to a mutual friend's party, and I showed up a bit early, and I actually spent a little bit of time watching the first little bit of Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, which
Mhm.
stars both Hart and Black, as well as The Rock and Karen Gillian.
Yep.
And yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting coincidence.
I mean, hey, coincidence happen, and this one just happens to work.
Yeah,
And then the princess of the story, Fiona.
sure.
I first thought of Dove Cameron, who a lot of people might know for doing other musical movies like the Descendants films, who which were also done by the same guy who did High School Musical. So she would definitely be familiar with that type of setting. Uh, I feel like she could sing as Fiona. I wasn't entirely sure on how she would be able to perform as Fiona. And then I thought, if not her, then maybe someone like Margot Robbie.
Hmm.
Because Fiona is a very feisty character. And I feel like Margot Robbie has played a few characters that have that feistiness in it.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of Dove Cameron doing it. I think after seeing like recently watching an episode of Liv and Maddie, which was kind of her breakthrough project on Disney, and I think she's got the attitude, certainly the vocal chops, and I think she's got everything it needs. I think.
All right, so yeah, either one could probably work then. And of course, the big baddie of the film, Farquaad. And of course, big being the operative word because Farquaad is known for being super short. And usually in the musical, Farquaad is ironically played by a tall person. They're usually just on their knees a good chunk of the time. But if we were to cast an actual short person, a lot of people might think immediately of Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, I thought so. Known as Game of Thrones guy, or otherwise known as the South Pole Elf.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a lot of people who grew up with Elf, they might think of that role for Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
But he was also in Avengers Infinity War, and he was also in Narnia, specifically from Prince Caspian onward.
And I think he was in I know he was in a Super Bowl commercial for like fiery hot Doritos that was part of a pair of ads for, I think it was maybe Super Bowl 51 when the Pats overcame that like 25-point deficit. It could be. I know it was a Super Bowl. I just don't remember which one for certain.
I'm sure that could be found out with an easy
Yeah,
Google search.
sure.
Then I thought of two characters, but I feel like either one could be played by the same person,
Hmm.
especially if they used CGI. I
Hmm.
thought of Gingy, the gingerbread man, or Pinocchio. And oddly enough, the first person I thought of was Keegan Michael Key.
Hmm.
It may seem strange to some people, but he's done some wacky characters before in Gingy and Pinocchio, in the Shrek films especially, have their wacky moments for sure. And then I thought, could he do the voice of either one of those characters? And then I thought of when he did the voice of Toad in the Mario movie that came out recently. And I thought if he can do someone like Toad, he could probably do Gingy or Pinocchio.
Yeah, I think Keegan Michael Key has a little bit of musical film chops here and there. He has some musical film experience. He did The Prom, Jingle Jangle, A Christmas Journey. So it wouldn't be like um, too far out of his territory.
And he was in the prequel movie Wonka, but I don't remember if he ever sang or not in that movie.
Yeah.
I have to look that up.
Yeah, not sure
It,
if you were saying in any of them, honestly. I don't know.
yeah, I'll have to look up a little bit more information about that. Uh, but then I figured, you know what? Since we did Mary Poppins, the musical recently, let's cast a little bit of those characters. And I actually struggled with this one a little bit, partly because there could have been so many choices for certain characters, or I just couldn't think of a solid, like I could see it happening type of entry. But I thought of two characters, that being Bert and Admiral Boom. For Bert, I thought of two people. The first being Matt Smith. And a lot of people might know him unironically from his performance as the 11th Doctor in Doctor Who, or un- or ironically as his performance in the movie Morbius. And I haven't seen too much of either, but I feel like especially with the Doctor, you could have a lot of fun with that character while also having some serious moments. And that's the kind of stuff that Burt has. He's very goofy, he's very fun, but he also knows when to mellow down a little bit. So maybe Matt Smith could do something like that. But if not him, and maybe someone who I know has some musical experience and can also have moments like that, I thought of maybe Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, that was my pick for Bert.
Oh, there you go. Great minds think alike. For those that don't know, he has done some musical stuff before. One of the more popular ones for a while was his performance in Les Mis, at least the film version anyway. But then, of course, he is well known now for doing the role of P.T. Barnum in the musical movie The Greatest Showman.
And I think
Granted,
before both of those, he did a musical cold open for the Oscars when he hosted back in, I think it was 2009. I think
oh
because
wow,
that was the year that Slumdog Millionaire won Best Picture. So yeah,
okay,
it was that year that he did that. Yeah.
sure. Now I don't think The Greatest Showman has a stage version yet, which is kind of a shame in my eyes because when The Greatest Showman came out, it was everywhere. And because of that popularity, I would be surprised if by now it doesn't have at least a stage adaptation in the works. But if they were to make another movie based on The Greatest Showman, either he could reprise his role or somebody else could do it. But in terms of Mary Poppins, I could totally see him as Bert, as long as he can get the accent down.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of Jackman as Bert. Very honestly, I felt like that'd be kind of an obvious choice, but it's the only one that made sense that I could think of.
Right.
And he is, he's got the right, musical vocal style, the energy, the enthusiasm. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Sure. And then I mentioned Admiral Boom, and there weren't too many people I thought of for this one, but I feel like a solid performance, maybe not the best necessarily, but a solid performance I feel like could be done by Liam Neeson. I feel like he's got that low, kind of scruffy voice that would fit for a character like that. And I don't think Admiral Boom is in it much, nor does he ever sing. So Liam Neeson wouldn't have to do that. But I feel like he's at least got the type of voice and persona for a character like this.
Oh yeah, I've seen like a couple of his films. He does have a good authoritative voice.
Sure.
So yeah, and I
Like
think
some people
I
might
think
know him for Qui-Gon Jinn. He, of course, was Aslan in the Narnia movies. And there's definitely a few others in there. Like he was the character in Taken with the famous line, "I will find you and I will kill you." And of course, he was Ra's al Ghul in the Christian Bale Batman films. So he can definitely do characters like that. So I feel like Admiral Boom could work for him. And then the last one I covered, especially since we're going to be doing it this year, is Beauty and the Beast. Granted, we already have a live action remake, which I think mostly followed the animated movie more so, at least when compared to the stage version. Granted, a lot of the things are exactly the same between them, um, but there are some at least minor differences in there. Some story elements were changed or something. Uh, and one of the more talked about ones that I've witnessed is how in the animated movie there was no song that the Beast sang when Belle leaves, like he sets her free. And then in the stage version, there's a very popular song called If I Can't Love Her. And a lot of people were really looking forward to that song when the live action movie was announced. But then that was replaced by Evermore, which I personally enjoy just as much. But Yeah, I'm trying not to get too far off topic, but there are some differences, and I feel like they could make a film based on the musical that would end up a little bit more well received than the live action version was, if they play their cards right. Then, in terms of who could I see playing what role, for Belle, I thought of a couple people. It was kind of a toss up. I first thought of Emma Stone, partly because Emma Watson already did it. Uh, and Emma Stone, she has some musical experience, I believe, and I feel like maybe she could do Belle.
Did she
But
sing in La La Land? I know her character has a singing moment.
oddly enough, as popular as that movie is, and how recommended it is, and I will admit Emma Stone has been my celebrity crush for a while. Uh, I have never actually seen that movie.
Hmm.
So maybe I will have to watch it in order to find out a little bit more about her singing if she ends up singing in the film. But since I was uncertain, I wanted to think of at least one other person. And I feel like maybe Anne Hathaway could do it because she's done some musical stuff. She's certainly done some Disney stuff before. Uh, and I feel like she could at least carry a character very similar to what Belle was in the animated film. So that could be pulled off. And of course, she has some musical experience, so that definitely helps.
Hmm.
Uh, so maybe it's kind of a toss up between her and Emma Stone, at least for now. And then in terms of Gaston, uh, I once again thought of Hugh Jackman. He's got the singing experience. He's done a few musicals. He's definitely got the build for Gaston because I don't know if everybody realizes that that guy has a bit of muscle on him, but I definitely think that could translate well for this character. And I think he could really mimic a similar personality to Gaston, especially again in the animated version. And then moving on to the next one, Mrs. Potts. Uh, I had thought of a couple people, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this one, but I'm definitely more sold on it than anyone else I even briefly considered. And I thought of Meryl Streep.
Hmm.
I believe she does have some musical experience or movie musical experience. So this wouldn't be too unfamiliar for her. And I feel like she's at that point in her life where she could play a gentle character like Mrs. Potts.
Yeah, I did see Mamma Mia. I don't know if she actually sang in it or not, but I don't know. It's probably not too far out of the question.
Well, I think she played a character
Yeah.
in the movie musical Into the Woods.
Oh yeah, yeah. Right.
Again, I haven't seen it, so I don't know what her singing exactly sounds like, but apparently she's a semi-popular choice. Um, yeah, I could at least see it. If she's directed well, I think she could pull it off. And for the Beast, this one was a bit difficult because I couldn't think of too many people that could play a big, ferocious beast, but also a kind, gentle man once he turns back into a human who can also sing on top of all that. And one person I thought of, I'm thinking if he can sing well, maybe it could be Jason Momoa.
Hmm.
Because I feel like he's got that build and the presence that could work well for the beast. I wasn't entirely sure how he would do as the human version at the end, but I feel like he can at least be the beast if he can sing. I don't know if he can, but if he's able to, I feel like it could work.
All right.
And then the last two characters I thought of for this list were Cogsworth and Lumiere. For Cogsworth, I thought maybe someone like Tom Hiddleston. I feel like he could at least do a voice similar to David Ogden Stiers. Maybe not exactly the same, but of course, you don't always want everything to be exactly the same. Um, but I feel like he could deliver the attitude, the humor, and just the overall persona that Cogsworth has. And if he doesn't have too much musical experience yet, maybe this could be his way into it.
Yeah, I did see a public event where Hiddleston appeared in character as Loki, and he kind of does the whole. I guess it's a ritual of say my name, Loki, and yeah,
Yep.
yeah, he's got the amplitude, he's got the projection, if not nothing else.
He's definitely got that. And now thinking about this right now, I do remember seeing some videos where he was actually singing. So I know now for sure that he can do that. That would definitely help. And then, like you were saying about the other stuff, I could see him as Cogsworth.
Yeah.
And then for Lumiere, I again thought of maybe Hiddleston if he can do a French accent, which I'm sure he could because he's done some country accents, and I know that's entirely different. But doing accents in general can be difficult. So I feel like if he can be given enough time to practice it, he could do it. But then if not him, I thought maybe a guy who's gotten a lot more acting experience recently, especially with popular characters, especially one or two that can sing. And I thought if he can do a French accent, I could maybe see Timothy Chalamet doing it.
Mm.
And of course, a lot of people might know Timothy Chalamet now for maybe the Dune films or his role as Wonka in the recent prequel film. So I feel like he could have a lot of fun with a role like this.
Yeah, maybe.
And that is all I got. What about you?
Yeah, well, I thought of a handful of musical films, and first one was Legally Blonde. It started out as a movie, then it was adapted into a stage musical, which my brother actually did a production of in high school.
Okay.
And then, and if that musical were itself adapted for the medium of film, I thought of a handful of specific actors for specific roles, starting with, for the role of Elle Woods, of course, Chloe Fineman, the SNL comedian, probably best known for doing impressions of multiple celebrities like Jennifer Coolidge and Nicole Kidman, and humorously enough, Timothy Chalamet as well. And also known for her ability to impersonate Reese Witherspoon. And well, yeah, fun fact, she actually did a sort of virtual cast reunion or something, Reese, at some point. And she said she had seen a YouTube video that Chloe had done with another actress recreating a scene from the movie.
Okay.
And and, and Chloe played the part of Elle, and I think she, for the most part, nailed it.
I mean, well, if she has already kind of done the role, and if she can do as good a Reese Witherspoon impression as you say,
Yeah.
then I believe that would definitely be a solid choice.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and then for the role of Callahan, the law school teacher, I finally, this might have taken me a while, I finally landed on Jonathan Groff, probably best known for his work on Broadway in shows like Spring Awakening and Hamilton, voiced Kristoff in Frozen.
Hmm.
Um, and probably what got me thinking Jonathan Groff was his little comedic performance as King George in Hamilton. I don't know if you saw Hamilton when it came out on Disney Plus. I did though, and he's got you know he's pretty entertaining, kind of a comedic smart mouth sort of authority figure, and I think that would be a good fit for Callahan.
Okay, yeah. I definitely know Groff more so for his performance as Kristoff, but based on what you're saying, it definitely seems like he could pull it off for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then for the role of Emmett, the man who befriends Elle throughout the story, I thought of Ryan Gosling. Emmett is how do I describe this? Is a very kind of down to earth sort of quiet, tender sort of guy, and I feel like Gosling has proven that he can at least act that way on screen pretty well.
Sure.
So yeah, Ryan Gosling.
Was he the guy in the Barbie movie?
Ken, yep.
Was there singing in that film? I never saw it.
I don't know. I think he might have sung in La La Land, which I know you didn't see. I didn't see Barbie, but yeah.
It definitely, when doing a musical, whether it be on stage or on film, it definitely helps to sing. So if he can do it, then sure, I could see it happening.
Yeah, I think he probably does. So
Okay.
And then for Pauline, the hair salon owner, yeah, this was tricky. This is actually this is fun fact. The character that was played in the movie by Jennifer Coolidge, whom I mentioned, Chloe Fineman can impersonate Goat, and so yeah, this is pretty tough. I'm trying to think of someone with a little bit of a, for lack of a better verbal description, ghetto voice, and a little bit of attitude, maybe. I thought of Tachina Arnold, an African American actress whom you would probably best know for her role in Everybody Hates Chris, and I think she was part of the Greek chorus in Little Shop of Horrors, though I didn't see that movie though. So yeah, again a tricky one, but that was my what I landed on.
Yeah, I haven't seen Little Shop of Horrors. Uh, this one I'll probably have to take your word on because
Yeah.
at least by name, I'm not too familiar with her.
Sure. And then for Vivian, who kind of has a rivalry with Elle in the story, Vivian Kensington, I thought of yeah. This was probably a tricky one too. You gotta think of an actress who can be a little sassy, who can be a bit of a smart aleck,
Mhm.
with some charm, of course. And I finally landed on Anna Kendrick. I think she's known for at least in the commercial she's done, for having that bit of a smart mouth you kind of want for Vivian.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I'm by that one.
yeah. Yeah. And then Back to the Future, which more recently was brought to the musical stage. I think it just opened on Broadway, like maybe last June. So for Marty McFly, who's kind of a bit of a dorky, but also somewhat authoritative at times, I thought, I guess I thought of someone who could be a good mix of both, and I finally landed on Zac Efron.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, that definitely could work now. For a while, I may or may not have been sold on that because a lot of people may know that in the first High School Musical, at least for the most part, that wasn't actually him singing.
right,
So I wasn't sure about his singing talents. But then by the time High School Musical 3 came out, and then The Greatest Showman, which he was also heavily featured in,
Right.
he showed that he can act and sing.
Yeah.
And for a character like Marty McFly, now I could definitely say I can see it.
Okay. And then for Marty's mom, Lorraine McFly, I don't know. But this was probably based more on my memory of her young appearance in the first film.
Okay.
Mm. And then I thought of Mary Mouser, who plays Samantha LaRusso, Daniel LaRusso's daughter, on Netflix's Cobra Kai.
Oh. Yeah, I haven't seen the Cobra Kai show, so this may be another one I have to take your word on.
Yeah.
But maybe she's done some other things that I just don't realize. I'll just have to look it up.
Yeah. And then for George McFly, I went with someone who is a little more known for some acting on on Broadway. I think he was the lead for a little bit of the Broadway run of Dear Evan Hansen, and I first saw him. There was a short-lived sitcom on ABC called The Real O'Neills that he played a role in as a teenager. Noah Galvin. Now he, from what I remember from watching Real O'Neills, very was kind of dorky, sort of a little maybe insecure, and of course, a big part of the story is George McFly struggling to overcome that in the first Back to the Future. So I think that would be a good fit.
Yeah, I buy it.
Yeah.
Especially after you give your reasoning, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then I thought of The Karate Kid, which another recent addition to the Broadway repertoire. And trying to find roles, this was probably the trickiest one. I wanted to think of ones, for Daniel and Allie and Kreese and Johnny, but came up with nothing for those. But I did land on one for the mentor, Mr. Miyagi. And I landed on, some might say, the obvious choice, Jackie Chan. Maybe in part because he kind of played the role in like the remake made by Will Smith and starring his son Jayden. But I do know that he has had some experience singing. I think he did like a Chinese language version of "I'll Make a Man Out of You" from
That's
Mulan.
true.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that. It's like I can't remember an instance of him singing, but now that you said that, I do vividly remember him doing the Chinese rendition of that song.
yeah. So yeah, that was the best thing I could come up with for Mr. Miyagi.
I mean, it certainly makes sense. And like you mentioned in the Karate Kid remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, he was the Miyagi-esque character where he was the mentor for the newcomer that was learning how to fight. So it's like, it's right up his alley because in a way he's done it before.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's like he's a martial artist. He's an experienced singer. He could do it.
Yeah, I could definitely see it for sure. That one I am
Yeah.
absolutely sold on.
Yeah. I don't know how acquainted he is with like the Guju-Ryu Okinawan karate stuff. I think he's more like a kung fu fighter, but I feel like it wouldn't be too far out of his wheelhouse.
Sure. I mean, even when they did the quote unquote Karate Kid in 2010, they were teaching kung fu, so
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, but I feel like if you're gonna do it right. Do actual Guju-Ryu karate and don't rely too much on kung fu. That's what I'd say.
Oh, absolutely. If it's called a Karate Kid, do actual karate.
Yeah. Yeah. But we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I also thought of Mary Poppins pretty much because we had just performed the musical. Honestly, Lee, I think I would love to see the musical version brought to film by Disney, or preferably by Disney at some point.
Sure.
And I also, like I mentioned before, I thought of Hugh Jackman as Bert. And yeah, we kind of touched on that already.
Sure.
For Mary Poppins, I kind of I guess debated this one for a while. I thought of Anne Hathaway for a while because of Les Mis and if nothing else.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
but I actually only ended up going with Vanessa Hudgens after seeing about her win recently on The Masked Singer, and but knowing she does have a bit of some, I think, theatrical music chops, I think, and I think she's got the right kind of, I guess, spunk, the right personality. I think it would be maybe a chance to see her maybe do something a little unexpected, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen her sing too much as of recent. Uh, and I'm only just starting that season of The Masked Singer. So I'll definitely get the chance to hear her sing again. But it, it could work. Sure.
Yeah, well, I know she's done like a British character, I think, before with like some other movie series, so I think it wouldn't be too far out of her wheelhouse.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right, and then yeah, yeah. I wanted to think of ones for George Banks and Robertson A and Mrs. Brill, but I couldn't. But I did come up with a few other ones for Mrs. Banks. I thought of something that might be a bit out there a choice. I thought of Jackie Ivanko, from what I've seen from like her from like her outward personality, like I guess as a performer and as a public figure, I think it would be something that would be fitting, and she can, of course, she's got the voice that many are familiar with. So
How old is she now?
let's see, 24 actually.
I was about to say, I remember when she was on America's Got Talent a while back. I think she was only 10
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah.
Uh, but has it really been that long?
Mm,
Holy cow. And I think she was also on The Masked Singer at some point.
yeah. Yep. Yep. And I had no idea it was her, honestly. I never guessed her once.
Yeah, I definitely didn't either. And I think a large part of that is because I didn't hear her sing after her voice got deeper. And I normally heard her sing opera. So when she didn't, it definitely threw me for a loop.
Yeah. And then I thought of for Mr. Northbrook, the guy who kind of gives the kids a little change and proposes an investment in a factory. I thought of, and I think the main reason I actually thought of this actually just today, honestly. I mentioned before last night I had seen Taking Chance, the sort of military Memorial Day-ish film that he starred in, and uh, I think of Northbrook as kind of a sort of humane, down to earth sort of person. I feel like Bacon showed that he can portray that in a movie, in that film that I saw last night. So I thought of him, and he is a musician, I believe. So I think he might have the chops to sing if he's got to. So uh, I'm going to go with Kevin Bacon for that.
He's definitely got the music background. And I mean, Northbrook doesn't sing too much.
No,
Uh, in fact, Northbrook only really shows up in one scene overall.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I could buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this one may come as a surprise to a lot of you. For Miss Andrew, the former childhood nanny of George Banks, who shows up late in the story, I thought of Lady Gaga, and the thing that got that thought rolling in my head was my mind went back to her performance of the song from The Sound of Music at the Oscars. And she's got the range, she's got the pitch, so she's got that. I think she's got the operatic voice that you want in a singing performance for that character. And she has a bit of a sort of, I don't know. I saw a couple of years ago. I saw a couple of her like YouTube vlogs and thought, and just remember them being kind of almost. I don't want to say pretentious, but like just like super like prim, fancy. So I feel like, and Miss Andrews kind of a very serious sort of pretentious personality. So I think I would maybe suggest Lady Gaga for that role.
Yeah, I probably would too, actually.
Yeah.
As long as she can carry across a very feisty, nasty attitude.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, Lady Gaga.
Yeah. She is. I do kind of know her to be a bit of a sailor mouth sometimes. So.
Oh, that much I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of reflects in some of her lyrics, I think. So I don't
Sure.
really listen to her anymore. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for Mr. Corey, or otherwise known as Mrs. Corey, it's kind of it. The gender kind of varies, like from production to production of the musical. I mean, I think I think originally it was Mrs. Corey, but at least for our productions, or for Artists Unlimited productions of the show, we've gender swapped it to a man.
Yeah, honestly, that role could easily be played by a guy or a girl because it's not really dependent on one or the other.
It's very neutral.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, but I landed on. So I thought, for a time I was thinking maybe we try to think of a Mrs. Corey. I ended up going with a Mr. Corey because that was easier for me to think of.
Sure.
And I thought of um, Corbin Blue, who I know is probably best known for his High School Musical role, but also I don't know. He has that kind of from like what I've seen in like the press and maybe the off Broadway Little Shop of Horrors performance that he did on GMA. Perhaps I think he has that kind of smirky, almost playful vibe, and I think that's maybe something you want in a Mr. Corey if you're gonna do that.
Yeah, that is definitely one I am sold on for sure. Uh, Granted, I haven't seen too much of his stuff outside of High School Musical,
Yeah.
but I've been intrigued in checking more of his stuff out. And I think based off some Facebook posts I've seen him make recently, he actually is currently doing some Broadway-ish stuff. So he's definitely still in the business. Uh, and I think he has that fun personality that would fit perfectly for a character like, in this case, Mr. Corey. He's definitely got the energy if nothing else, and he can sing.
Thoughts, everything. We'd love to hear from you.
Anything, any type of interaction we have with our audience is more than welcome. Any questions you have, any ideas you have for future episodes, or if you want to know something about what we've said before in a previous one or even this one, find a way to reach out. And hey, maybe one of your ideas can be featured as a topic in our future videos.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, everyone, and see you again soon.
So long, everyone.